Next on the agenda is a annual review next one is updates on the National Public Broadband. Yeah. Do you want to repeat the whole thing? Yeah, exactly.
All right.
More acronyms.
More acronyms.
Just you should have enough earlier. By the way, new commissioners, if we throw too many acronyms around, we'll mention acronyms.
Definitely.
Also raise your hand and ask to, please.
Raise your hand.
This is acronyms particular. Yeah.
Some of this activity was reviewed with the PSCC at the last meeting in April. We're doing a little bit of review to give the new commissioners a leg up on what's happening in the broadband arena. Two main areas of this talk will be what's happening at the national level and then what's happening specifically within Arizona.
Michael, can we do a check? Can we make sure the commissioners are talking here?
Can the commissioners on the phone hear?
Yes. I can hear it pretty well wherever it's located at.
Okay.
Try again.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Jeff, can you hear us?
Yes.
Thank you. We turned you up earlier. Somebody put us on hold and we were getting, I don't know, news about Glendale.
All right. With the legislation that was passed in February, four main things come to the forefront. Public safety was allocated to EVOC spectrum. Formation of FirstNet, the First Responder Network Authority, which is responsible for the complete build-out of a public safety broadband network, and I should say maintainable and sustainable broadband network. And then tasked with working with all the state and local jurisdictions to actually work through what the requirements are at the local level. Funding for that is the state and local grant program, or SLIG-P for a new acronym, $135 million nationally. And then the full build-out is targeted at $7 billion, with $2 billion up front, and the remaining $5 billion is a result of auctioning off spectrum as it becomes available and as they can auction it off. The last bullet point, it establishes this as a fee-based system that the FirstNet can actually charge for use of the backhaul and the RAN. If they build out the RAN, which RAN is the radio access network, which is the actual physical towers, the equivalent of cell towers on a commercial network. It allows for public-private partnerships. All right, the National Public Safety Broadband Network, or the NPSBN, that portion of the system is the backbone and the brains, in terms of the core, where the user repositories, the switching networks, the access, the security, and all that stuff is in the national backbone. Supposedly based on commercial standards to be able to reduce the cost on a proprietary, supposedly the same types of equipment as the commercial providers, with economies of scale and reduce costs. And then the FirstNet's been tasked with providing access for the state to tap into that backbone. The portion in green, the regional WANs and the backhaul and the towers, is referred to as the RAN portion. That's going to be built out on a state level kind of management process. So the FirstNet will work with the state on the requirements, and they'll come back with a proposal. The state will either accept or reject the proposal. If they reject it, they've got to build out their own RAM, and let the opt-in, opt-out gone through into the legislation. But regardless of opt-in or opt-out, we the state need to understand what our requirements are and what our needs are. I'm sorry, I was going to ask that backbone.
before. Sure. Are the feds going to build that and manage that themselves, or are they looking to?
Not necessarily. There are plenty of options they can do. They can outsource it to Verizon. They can say, okay, we need it now, and with these requirements of SLA and priority and security and so on and so forth, they could opt to have somebody else build it out. Yes.
What are we looking on, looking at it from the timelines concerned, just in ballpark? Are you coming to that?
I'm coming to that, of course. Speaking of the devil. All right. In March, the FCC established the Interoperability Board, and they were tasked with putting together the minimum interoperability requirements for the national network. They completed that, and it's been approved by the FCC. They completed it on May 22nd. The FCC had 30 days to review it, which they did, and they've approved it. So that's actually happened. On schedule, by the way. Federal action on time. All right.
Public safety all works with.
True. The next event was NTIA put on a request for feedback on how the Split P grant program should be run and organized. I've got a few slides to review on that later. And the next major event coming up is the announcement of the FirstNet board members. NTIA was given 6 months to identify appropriate board members. And the board is made up of providers, public safety, state and local representatives, a good mix of people to be on that board. And then supposedly August 22nd, NTIA is supposed to provide grant guidance on the Split P process. Unfortunately, there's little whoops in the legislation. They're also supposed to review it with FirstNet. But FirstNet is just, basically 2 days old at that point. So they're not going to have a good idea of what they plan to do, which will affect the Split P grant process. So my feeling is we'll probably get a pretty generic grant guidance on August 22nd, and then a follow-on real nuts and bolts in how one should put together the Split P process like 3 to 6 months later. So I'm guessing as to when we're going to be able to submit a grant request. I'm thinking Q2 2013, maybe Q1 if we're lucky.
Now, is that going to be formulaic? Is that just based on each state?
I mean, there are going to be different approaches by different states, but I would imagine that many of the states with similar issues, like the western states, may end up with a very similar process. Some of the states with a statewide system are going to be different than states with a system.
How are they? So is it just a matter of filling that out, and I mean it's going to be based on population, and there's some kind of formula they're going to do, versus a competitive grant? So
it's probably going to be formulaic. They're going to try and spread it like peanut butter as judiciously as possible, given population, land. Okay, continuing the timeline, hopefully by Q3 2013 we'll have the grant awards so that we can actually start doing the R&D work and inventory and so forth. Complete that within probably 9 months is the ballpark. So early 2014, review the results. At some point in time, we're going to get the RFPs from FirstNet presented back to us, and then we'll do a comparative analysis and then present that and walk that through with everybody in Arizona and the government. Okay. Again, to the NTIA's request for input on the Split P grant guidance, they did about 19 questions with about between 3 and 5 subparts of these, so it's a pretty extensive request for information. So it was broken down into these 5 major areas. Our office and working with the Arizona Public Safety Broadband Network Work Group went through and kind of hit the highlights and provided input back to Homeland Security for their input into the NGA response, the National Governors Association. And then we also provided input to the Operator Advisory Council, which are the waiver recipients. The 21 national waiver recipients provided feedback. And then we also sent it to the NTIA directly. So through these various avenues, we got our point across 3 times. Key elements of our recommendations, and very similar to other states' recommendations, there were about 10 to 12 states, maybe 20 states that responded. To questions about whether or not states should be compensated, we said yes. We should be compensated for the efforts. We recommended using existing agencies rather than creating a whole new set of agencies. Leverage the relationships that are already established. Fortunately for us, in the Office of the Department of Administration, we have a state CIO, who is also the chair of the PSCC. We have the PSCC. We have the SBI broadband, which is the generic broadband for health education, broadband and mapping, Broadband USA, in the DOA office, and 911. So we're pretty coherent anyway, just by having it. Lucked out, right? All right. What kind of assets should be documented in terms of shareable assets? And then looked at this particular one, the item 4. They specifically asked, should the SWIC grant process fund FTEs or new bodies? And we said yes, possibly, because we don't know if that's going to be needed, but there are other grants where you couldn't get FTEs covered. Particularly for the western states, we emphasize the need to cover rural, come up with innovative ways to cover rural, and then recommended that we waive it's an 80-20 grant process, recommended waiving it entirely, considering the amount of effort they were asking the states to do, and then if not waived, definitely consider in-kind contribution.
Sorry, just for a second about the alignment with the broadband.
In terms of
Some of the mapping with data, effort, some of the ongoing stuff that we have able to work.
True. The SBI Broadband Initiative, Digital Arizona Project is the name. They've been working on mapping what consumers have in the way of broadband capacity and documenting the urban coverage versus rural lack of coverage. They've been working on various and sundry initiatives through Arizona legislation. They actually passed a bill that ADOT, Department of Transportation, could treat information just like they treat cars and trucks. In other words, they're allowed to, and encouraged to, build conduit for fiber along state highways and county roads. So that's actually, and part of the legislation has been approved. Further, there's other legislation coming on board to establish a statewide commission to be able to manage and kind of direct activities in the broadband arena and also receive funds in public-private partnerships. So through that agency and that entity, we would probably leverage that for our public safety efforts and especially work with them for the backhaul and the infrastructure in terms of the fiber network that will be needed. Other states, in terms of broadband, are heading into the microwave arena, and like New Mexico has established a microwave backbone. I think for the long haul, microwave just won't have the capacity that we will eventually need. So unless it's obvious we can't, we're going to try and go fiber. Do you think? Okay. happen nationally. NIPSIC, the National Public Safety Telecommunications Council, and actually this agency's been around so long, I'm surprised it's not Telegraph Council. But they put together a broadband requirements document in 2007, and since the legislation has occurred, a lot of technology improvements have been made, decisions have been made, like single PLMN ID for national network, which means no roaming for public safety no matter where they go in the nation. They have taken on the task of rewriting and providing more detail into the statement of requirements for a broadband network for public safety. So there's about 100 people working on this right now. We're heading into the third round of iteration on the editing, and the plan is to deliver it to NIPSIC and post it on the NIPSIC website for public comment, and also to FirstNet to give them an idea of what public safety thinks it needs. All right, any questions national? All right, Arizona. All right, the PSCC office has been identified. Part of the FirstNet and NTIA approach is to have a single point of contact, single agency to work through. So the PSCC office, in conjunction with PSCC, has been identified as that point of contact. The Public Safety Broadband Network Work Group was approved in our last PSCC meeting, has been established. We have a technical component and a governance component to that. The idea is to develop the plan for the best use of the SLIP grant funds. And in the future, we'll work with FirstNet to negotiate the coverage requirements in the RFP when that comes about.
There's much room on that committee if anyone wants to join.
Yeah.
Just come on.
More the merrier.
And the output of that committee is for what?
Basically to address any of the needs for, really,
We appreciate your call and your patience while waiting for assistance. We'll be with you as soon as possible.
Okay, Iowa Broadband plan was presented back in April. Pretty much changed, stayed the same, changed. We're going to keep abreast of what's happening nationally. Provide input to the SCIP update, which we've already done, and Justin will be reviewing that later. Work with Digital Arizona at 911 to make sure they're brought on board and as much as possible identify synergies between the two. Work with public safety community to figure out what our requirements are for public safety broadband and how this can assist our interoperability efforts. And then work with the PSCC office and with PSCC in terms of the SLIP grant process. Work with public safety stakeholders to figure out how we're going to interact with FirstNet. And things in this arena fall into, it's a fee-based system. Are the local jurisdictions going to pay FirstNet directly, or the local jurisdictions going to pay the state, and then the state pay FirstNet? We got to work through all those droll machinations of actual day-to-day operations. All right, and then perform the research analysis required to provide input on the opt-in, opt-out decision, and then continually report. Last month, late last month, we were able to go to the NGA. It was pretty much the same people giving the same message, but it was to a completely different audience in terms of CIOs, a lot more CIOs, and governors, policy advisors, and aides, and so forth. So the message that you guys have heard already in terms of this is not a replacement for mission-critical voice, at least for the foreseeable future. We should include our CIO. We include our CIO. And really emphasize the need to explore public-private partnerships, especially with infrastructure sharing, and the real emphasis on what the utilities could possibly bring to bear. Okay. And then in a breakout session, a lot of the western states expressed an interest in joining up together and speaking as one, especially as it relates to rural coverage. And as we get to defining our fiber backbone and stuff, sharing that infrastructure. Because in a lot of cases, we'll have more capacity than we need, and we have to leverage the fact that digging those trenches is costly, and being able to share those, especially for Arizona, for instance, in our northwest corner, it's a really hard haul to get there, okay, but it's right next to St. George. So. All right, so as a follow-on to that, Nevada has been spearheading, actually moving in that direction, so we've had a few conference calls with them, and they're moving ahead to establish regular meetings. Unique situation for Nevada, they meet every other year. This coming year is their meeting, so they have to kind of like hurry up and get any legislation in the hopper before they even know what they're supposed to do. So that's a little awkward for them, because otherwise they'll hit a dead zone and won't be able to respond until 2 years from now. We've been holding informal discussions with vendors just to find out where they think they fit in the picture. 3, the RCC consultants, Televate, and Federal Engineering are focused primarily on the SLIC-B grant guidance and assisting in any subject matter expertise in that arena. Others are specifically staying away from that so that they won't impact their chances to partner with FirstNet directly and build out a national network. And note that we have got some large military-oriented vendors in play, Raytheon, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman, and let's see here. Oh, that's right, Michael, we're saving the best for last. Motorola's later, okay? All right, and we started discussions with utilities. I got a call through Justin, I believe, right? And it's for the Utilities Telecom Council. They were trying to find who they could talk to about public safety broadband.
Okay.
Found out that there was an Arizona utility that wanted to talk to somebody about possible sharings. Turned out to be SRP. Through those discussions, we're trying to get all Arizona utilities kind of under one umbrella so that we can speak to them as a group rather than having to do each one individually, and then also work out some kind of ability to get a standard set of interactions documented so that can be used by other states and other utilities as we go through. Because UTC has a lot of representation nationally. All right, that's it. Any questions from Steve?
In your previous presentation, you talked about establishing another commission. I'm not sure what that was at the federal level or at the state level. We're talking about overseeing the project.
The digital project, broadband legislation, and that.
Right. Is that commission really established?
Not yet. They're trying to get legislation through. The legislation was I can't remember. Did it get voted on, or is it just didn't get there? Got table? Committee?
Yeah, I don't remember where it ended up.
Yeah.
It went there and back, and then I think it
That's at the state level.
It is. So today we have a broadband team on my team that has 2 grants. One of them is a planning grant, one of them a mapping grant. And so there are specific outcomes that they're currently working on. One of the things that we've been challenging them on is how do we prioritize and identify areas within the state where we either have, where we call the feds call them white spaces, where the capabilities just doesn't exist today, or where could we potentially put in continuity or backhaul, where we've got 2 places, maybe they're a mile and a half apart from each other, and we can connect those 2 segments of fiber. And so we've been trying to figure out how do we start to prioritize that. And so with the state, we don't have a mechanism today to accept funding. So that's one of the things that we would have to do. And we need to figure out, if we were to, so the overall goal is how do we, if you're going to build a piece of fiber, it's as easy to put in 5 conduits or 7 conduits as it is to put in 1 conduit. And then can you potentially lease that conduit back, right? And then, so how do you start to build a model that allows us to, when we did some research, we found out that it costs about $27,000 per mile to paint the lines on a highway. It costs about $26,000 per mile to trench and to lay conduit, give or take how many pieces of conduit. And that doesn't include the fiber, but the fiber can be blown through at a later point. And so how do you start to prioritize where that conduit needs to be put in the state so you can start to connect these different points and develop ROI models from the different areas of the state. And so we're trying to put together the right team and legislation and financial structure, and how do you work with the private sector, and to start to drive that thing forward. And then at the same time, then the public safety broadband stuff kind of came along, and we start to see some alignments, because some of the areas that are a concern for education are also a concern from a public safety, are also a concern from an economic, are also a concern from a healthcare, et cetera down the line. And so how do we start to build this strategy so we can all head in the same direction together?
That was my concern, was overlapping and competing for resources.
Totally.
So my concern was that the shooting from the state as an advisory to the governor's office is that we're somewhat unified in our methods, that we don't step like the other
Exactly.
And I continue progressing with public safety.
Yep. That's exactly it. So fortunately, it's all in my office. So kind of been, these guys all meet at the same time. We've been inviting each other to each other's meetings. We brought in the land group, the land department, which has statewide GIS system, right? So we're trying to bring them in, because how do we start to plan out all these assets? How do you get the exact coordinates? How do you be able to do that analysis, with tools? So yeah, we're starting to build up that coalition to figure this out.
Okay.
Another question over there, Michael?
Oh, hey, Mike.
Yeah, is there an education component to the users out, the user community out there, to let them know what the capabilities of this system will be, so that they can start planning for it, and then maybe decide whether they're going to opt in or opt out?
Yeah, part of our effort will be an outreach and ramp up of what public safety broadband would mean to use. And on the tail end, part of the AZPSIC SOR is training and education and bringing people up at the local admin, local ops level of how local ops interact with the national network as well. But you're right, up front, definitely have to bring people up to speed, and it's a little difficult because you don't quite know what it is yet, But I think as FirstNet gets formed, we'll get a little clearer picture of what the impacts are going to be and what the benefits will be as well.
So just to qualify on opt-in versus out as well, the choice is, do the feds come in and build it for us, or does the state itself feel that we're more of subject matter expert at the regional level to build it out, to the fed standards? And that's really where that decision is going to come from.
Yeah, what you're talking about probably is don't play.
And that brings up my next question. Once say, is the state planning to build out to a certain coverage level, the state's going to do that, and say an urban area requires a greater coverage level, are they going to be responsible for that, or will that be part of the state plan to include that?
And those are issues that we're going to have to be addressing as a group and apply. Because, you know, I've heard discussions go many different ways, but in terms of why would you opt out? You can just opt in, get FirstNet to build whatever it can, and then if you need more, build on top of it. Because eventually FirstNet is going to have the capability of expanding the original build, whatever process that takes. More than likely, they'll have their own fee-based maintenance and expansion bucket, but they'll also probably have to respond to states saying, hey, this is critical infrastructure, we've got to have it, and we've got to cover it. So we've got to build it out with our funds. And, well, I'm sure FirstNet would be happy to say, yes, please.
The other thing I would add to that stuff, too, is back to the conversation we were just having. I mean, if the feds come in, they're going to build the public safety infrastructure, right? Then we're going to go over and we're asking the Department of Education for money to come out and build the education network. Then we're going to go over to, Health and Human Services. We're going to ask them for money to come and build infrastructure as well. And that's my concern right now, is the feds model is looking at it from one angle, trying to solve one problem. I think that, from a state perspective, I think that we can do a little bit better job of trying to align these strategies and trying to accomplish multiple things with one stone. I think it also allows us to prioritize, what comes first. Because all of a sudden, because obviously this doesn't, you just don't flick a switch and boom, there's fiber everywhere. It just doesn't work that way, right? And so I think it gives us a little bit more local control. But that's what we need to figure out is, so what is that strategy? How do you evaluate that? Which option is better than one option? One option, you get to sit back and let the feds do it, and you get to, throw rocks at their plan, right? The other option is you got to get a bunch of shovels and you got to, make it work.
One note on that, NTIA is really trying to pay attention to the impacts to other education, health, and so forth. So fortunately, they're aware of the backhaul being generic.
Yep.
And
the problem everywhere.
Hopefully it'll be built at once.
Yep.
Or paid for it.
Hopefully. We've seen that before. Yeah. Thanks, Mike. All right, excellent.